As a Warhammer miniature painter, one of the highest accolades that we can earn is the infamous Golden Demon. And I'm never going to win one. But hopefully after this video, either will you. Now that sounded pretty grim, and don't worry, we are definitely going to be circling back and talking about that. And spoilers, it has nothing to do with ability, talent, or technical skill. Hello darkness, my old friend. Let's start here. What I'm shooting for here is somewhere between non-metallic metal and OSL. Something shiny and neon glowy just because it's cool. But because I'm using a combination of these techniques, I'm not using typical light sources. And we're not even going to be thinking about light placement in a traditional sense. Instead, we're just going to be looking for some kind of balance between the pink and the blue. But before I fully commit and start layering and highlighting, I am going to play around with the darkness and terrestrial titan just to see where we like everything sitting. And after we're happy with that, we can move into Triumphant Navy and start building up our blues. And technique wise, what you're going to see here is mostly feathering. And if you're not familiar with feathering, all we're going to do is put down a basic layer, rinse the paint out of the brush, and then with a slightly clean, slightly damp brush, we're going to start gently pulling away at the sides of that layer. What this is going to do is basically just thin it down, stretch it out, and create a nice easy gradient. You can kind of think of it as a mix between wet blending and glazing. And with that same idea, we're going to continue to build the layers going into Imperial Navy. Again, just dropping in the paint where we actually want it to sit, and then coming back in with that clean, damp brush and just kind of whisking it away a little bit. You can see on the chest panel that we were slightly diluting the paint that was still on the model and just fading it out. Once you get the hang of it, this is a really quick and easy way to start blending. It's also a great way to start prepping blends before you come in with a glaze and completely smooth out the transition. With those first two shades of blue laid down and faded out, we're going to do a bigger jump in our next layer into crystal blue. And because this is a pretty drastic jump up, we're going to be using this more as a little bit of a highlight. Think kind of like a pre-highlight. Because we already have our Triumphant Navy and Imperial Navy laid down and faded out, this big step in brightness is going to start to sell the effect that it's either reflecting or glowing. And since the idea was something between OSL and non-metallic metal, I think this is what we're actually aiming for. And that effect is going to get turned up to 11 when we bring in Arctic Gem for our highlights. When experimenting and playing around with something like this, the big thing to remember is to leave space. Not only should each new layer leave a little bit of the previous color showing, we also need to leave space for the pink that's going on the other side of each panel. And to kick that off, it's Diabolic Plum. Now, I know we just had a little bit of a lesson on feathering, but not all paints and colors are equal. While we're going to use the same basic idea on the pink side that we did on the blue side, when it comes to our feathering, I'm not only rinsing out the brush, but I'm adding a tiny bit of terrestrial titan into the bristles. And then when I go to feather out the sides of the blends of the Diabolic Plum, there is also a little bit of terrestrial titan in there, and it's actually going to be a little bit more like a wet blend. This way, we're still going to get a really nice smooth transition to match the other side without the milky coffee staining kind of effect. Even though you may be using colors out of the same paint range, each color is still going to have their own unique quirk. Just like Wicked Pink here, its coverage can be a little bit thinner than other paints out of the Fanatics range, but we can use that to our advantage when it comes to blending. It'll feather and smooth really well, and then once that layer is dry, we can come in with the exact same layer again and really boost the saturation. So in its own special way, it's kind of given us a free transition layer. Since we're not using traditional light sources or placement, we kind of have to rely on balance. And while we do need that even distribution of weight so one side doesn't seem heavier than the other, we still need somewhat of a focal point. And with this model in particular, I'm going to create a focus line right down the center, which means all my brightest highlights are going to be pushed towards the middle. And this is a line that I'm going to continue all the way down the model, not just in the pink. And this little bit of forethought is really going to help push the focus to where we actually want it to be, towards the head. So, have you figured out why I won't win a Golden Demon? You mean other than being mid? There's a long-standing rule that Golden Demon entries have to reflect the Warhammer setting. Which I understand, it's Games Workshop protecting their IP, so they can market other artists' work and still have that brand recognition. But why is this an issue? It's not really, except it can be. I don't typically paint in a way that reflects any of the Warhammer universes, which means what I'd feel is my best step forward as a miniature painter would be an absolute detriment to the entry itself. And if I'm being completely 100, changing that for the sole purpose of entering and winning a competition feels pretty disingenuous. If a musician or a band did that, we'd call them sellouts. I'm gonna be honest, I suck at scale mail. So here's a little trick that makes it somewhat passable. I'm gonna lay down a big old coat of the darkness. Cover the scales, get in the recesses, put it everywhere. And then while it's still wet, we're going to grab a little bit of grey castle on the end of our brush and start wet blending each scale individually. We're not going to be looking at the scales and highlighting them individually, but what we're trying to do is leave the darkness in the recesses. Now, this is where you have to work a little bit quicker than normal, because after you finish that first wet blend with grey castle, you're going to grab a little bit more grey castle and do it all over again while all the paints are still wet. And we are absolutely just going to keep repeating this step until we get to almost pure grey castle. But here's where scale mail gets a little bit tricky. While we are focusing on each scale individually, we also have to look at it as a whole. So what I'm actually doing here is following that same center focus line that we laid in on the pink and continuing it with the highlight down that section of the scale mail. If you have issues with your paints drying before you can complete the wet blend, you have two options. One, you can move your hands faster. Or two, add a little bit of retarder to the base coat, which was the darkness. This will slow down the drying process for that, and because we're just coming in and wet blending that same spot over and over again, it'll transfer. And then once it is all dry, final highlights with Castle Grey. When this channel started to look like it could become an actual career, I made a rule. No advertising products that have absolutely nothing to do with the hobby itself. And the two biggest ways that I can stick to that and not starve is the best Patreon members in the world and the Army Painter. If you wanted to grab any of the paints or brushes that you see here on the channel, jump onto the Army Painter web store and use Heresy5 at the checkout. And if you are one of the best Patreon members in the world, there is a code in there for an even bigger, sweeter discount. Links to the Army Painter and the Patreon are in the description. Let's be honest, painting cloaks and capes can be a massive pain in the ass to paint. Even if you're not going to use the same colors that I'm using now, this is an absolute cheat code. After laying down Terrestrial Titan in the recesses, I'm going to come in with Scarab Green for all the tops of the folds. And I'm pretty sure we can all see what's going to happen from here. Everything's big, shiny and wet, so yes, we're wet blending. When it comes to almost any other painting medium, wet blending is an absolute fundamental basic technique. But for some reason, when it comes to Warhammer painting and miniature painting in general, it's looked at as a pros only technique. And let's be honest, look at what I'm doing here. Does this look anywhere near professional? Yes, it can take some practice and a couple of tries in one section, but the bare bones basic of this is you're mixing two paints together. All you're trying to do is have pure purple on one side, pure green on the other, and a mix halfway between them in the middle. And as far as color placement goes, we're using the purple in the recesses or where the shadows would be, and then the green is going on the top of the folds where most of the light would be. And the most important part about wet blending to remember, once you finish that layer, don't touch it. Let it dry before you come back in with anything. After it is dry, you can do another layer on top, or you can start highlighting. I'm actually going to do a combination of the two. With a little bit of Guardian Green, I'm going to start to pick out all the top part of the raised folds. And then with a little bit of the Scarab Green again, I am going to start blending back into the sides all over again. And if you find that you go over the purple with your Scarab Green, just grab a little bit of the Terrestrial Titan purple again and fix it back up. And as long as you let the layers dry, you can go back and forth and repeat this as many times as you need to. I think we should clarify that this video isn't about shaming Games Workshop, Golden Demon, or anybody that's entered or won. Instead, it's the idea that you shouldn't stifle your creativity or who you are as a person or as an artist just to conform with the rule. Instead of just bending over to somebody else's idea of how you should create something, find somewhere else that you can just be you. Here's the thing, we could have gone with non-metallic metal gold and it would have looked pretty nice, but what's life without a little bit of whimsy? For the quote-unquote gold areas, I'm going to lay down a base coat of Diabolic Plum and then start highlighting with a 50-50 mix of Diabolic Plum and Wicked Pink. Now, when I say 50-50, I do not mean 1 drop of Wicked Pink to 1 drop of Diabolic Plum. That is a 1-to-1 ratio. The 50-50 mix that we need is a color halfway between Diabolic Plum and Wicked Pink. And remember that, because we're going to be doing that with every step that we take on these areas. After moving into pure Wicked Pink, we're then going to make a 50-50 mix between Wicked Pink and Burning Orange. These 50-50 mixes make great transition layers, especially when we add in all the other techniques that we've been using like feathering or glazing. And just like any other layering technique, we are leaving a little bit of the previous layer showing when we put the next layer on. Just like now when we move into pure burning ore. And just like the wicked pink, the burning ore as an orange paint has very similar properties, which means 2 thin coats really boosts the saturation. After that layer, we're going to bring Moonbeam Yellow into the mix. And when it comes to yellow, here's a tip that will save you from heartbreak every time. Do not go overboard with feathering or glazing. You can stretch it out a little bit with the feathering technique, but after that come in with the glaze of your previous color and blend it back in that way. Remember, it is always easier to glaze with darker colors than it is with lighter colors. And as we move into a pure Moonbeam Yellow, try to be patient and just use thin layers as you move up. This is not a time to go full hero mode. Work thin and build up the layers. It only takes an extra couple of minutes to get nice results instead of a headache. As negative or pretentious as some of this video may have seemed, painting competitions are actually a great way to push yourself and get detailed feedback on how to Painting competitions are actually a great way to push yourself and get detailed feedback on how to improve your technical ability. But in that push to become technically proficient, don't forget to be creative. It is absolutely fair to say that I'm not even in the conversation when it comes to technical ability and Golden Demon. But that's not what this video was about. This is a conversation about holding creativity above conformity for accolades. As always, a massive thank you to InGames, The Army Painter, and the best Patreon members in the world. Big love, you filthy heretics. Tell your mum not to forget the whipped cream this time.